Pat Robertson is going to rail against LGBT non-discrimination clauses and gay marriage here. Let's watch, and let's also play the game, spot the absurd comparison. Shouldn't be too difficult in this case.
Well, I think there's got to be some intelligent judge in the state of Washington who would rule against this. This is just outrageous. To say that some procedural anomaly in the statute overrules the fundamental religious freedoms of the people is just crazy. And I hope that the lawyers for this florist will appeal this thing to get into the federal courts. But this is outrageous. To tell a florist that she's got to provide flowers for a particular kind of wedding? What if somebody wanted to marry his dog? She's got to have flowers for that? What if there's a polygamous situation where a guy has 5 wives and he wants to have 5 ceremonies and she's going to be forced by the law to provide them flowers? I mean, this is crazy.
I find that hilarious because he slams polygamy there, totally forgets or doesn't know that polygamy is the most common form of marriage in the Bible. Over a dozen times it's referenced. How many wives did Solomon have? 500, 700 or something like that. He's so clueless, man. He's a Bible fundamentalist who knows dick about the Bible. It's like being a professional basketball player that doesn't dribble. What are you doing? What are you doing? You're just an old man who's on TV, has verbal diarrhea on a daily basis. And so what's amazing is that he ran for president, I believe in the 1980s, and he did pretty well. Anywhere from like 25% to 40% of the American population are people who kind of agree with Pat Robertson. 25, depending on which poll you look at, between 25% and 40% are evangelical Christians. That's a tremendous chunk of the American population. I mean, that's a lot. That's millions of people who listen to this guy speak and go, he got it, man. That's my guy right there. He represents me, the stuff that he says. Why don't you read the Bible and find out about the marriage in the Bible before you talk about it without knowing what the fuck you're talking about, Pat? So in the Bible, not only is there polygamy, there's also selling your daughter off to her rapist, stay classy, and men castrating themselves and living lives of celibacy. So if you really wanted to apply biblical values, that would be terrible. Cutting off your kibbles and bits and selling your daughter into slavery. I mean, but so you see, they're the king cherry pickers. The king cherry pickers. Only whoa, we hate gays. Well, the hating the gays thing is in the Old Testament. And there are a lot of other things in the Old Testament that I've never heard any conservative Christians mention. Like, for example, the classic example we always give, a ban on the fish market. A ban on shellfish. Lobster and crab, that's all. It's an affront to God to do that. So you should ban all those, right? Why are you not protesting? Why are evangelical Christians not protesting out in front of the fish market? Why are you not protesting to close all barbershops and salons in the country? It's an abomination in the eyes of God to ever get a haircut or shave your face if you're a guy. When a woman is on her period, she has to sleep outside. She can't even touch her husband in that situation because she's unclean at that time. In the Bible, a woman is not allowed to teach a man anything ever. That means all women teachers gone. Female-led orphanages, like, you know how nuns have those and they take in people and they take care of them? Gone. Couldn't exist. No females in the workplace in any way, shape, or form, at least not with any position of power, wouldn't be allowed under a biblical system. This is all in the Old Testament. That's where the gay stuff is. You talk about that, but you don't talk about the other stuff. They're just not smart, man. They're just not smart. Like, it's amazing to me that they can base their lives on this thing, and they never fucking read it. They never read it. And you heard him with the dog comment there. I mean, do we even need to bring up how ridiculous that is? Pat, when trying to craft law on these issues, like marriage, you have to have a standard. So what standard should you have? Well, first of all, just dismiss right away the fact that you want to base laws on any holy book, because you're not allowed to do that in the United States of America. That's the whole purpose of this country. You can't do that. So right off the bat, the whole idea of a biblical standard is gonzo. Not in the conversation, not allowed in the conversation. That's how the Founding Fathers crafted this country. So then what standard are you going to use? Well, I argue consenting adults. That's it. Consenting adults. And that encompasses pretty much everything. So the issue of polygamy. I love how they bring it up like a scare tactic. I honestly have no problem with it. You know, obviously if people are trying to do it just to do some sort of tax fraud scheme where they marry 87 people to get all these tax breaks or whatever, well, then obviously you have the government crack down on fraud and abuse and you don't allow that. But if people really are polygamous, I don't give a fuck. Whether it's a guy marrying 3 or 4 women or a woman marrying 3 or 4 guys, it really is none of my goddamn business. So the fear-mongering about that, it doesn't resonate at all. And the comparison to bestiality is absurd because, like I said, consenting adults, Shamu can't fucking consent. Your dog can't fucking consent. Okay, and so, by the way, sometimes I get messages from people who literally are pro-bestiality online. Yeah, they can consent. Really? When did Bessie the cow tell you that she wants you to put a ring on it? I mean, obviously they can't consent. Bestiality, I don't know of any serious movement or significant chunk of people, right? Like there's 3 people in the bestiality community, they all bother me on Twitter. But the overwhelming majority of people are like, okay, yeah, no bestiality, obviously. I would say polygamy, whatever. But gay marriage is a no-brainer because it's none of your goddamn business what 2 loving adults want to do with their lives. And it is a violation of the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause to say we're not going to treat you equally under the law. I mean, all they want to do is love each other with the same contractual obligations as everybody else. They want to have the same tax rights, Social Security rights, and stuff like that. And also, to his other point, talking about, oh, what are we going to do? Have bakeries, they're forced to sell to, people who marry brooms or people who marry dogs and shit. Well, number one, that's not going to happen. You're not going to have a system where people can marry mops or dogs or anything like that. But number 2, the standard for that is you can't discriminate for arbitrary reasons. And a lot of people have trouble grasping this. It seems like a very basic concept to me. So, for example, back in the day, interracial marriage was banned in the U.S. For most of U.S. history, interracial marriage was banned in many states, specifically red states. So would it be fair for a diner or any business to say, I'm not going to serve you because you're in an interracial marriage? Would we look at that today and say that should be allowed? No, we're all rightly morally outraged by that. So what did we do? We crafted policy that said you can't discriminate based on arbitrary things, like, for example, gender. I think religion is under that, and race is under that. All we're saying is add sexual orientation under that. I mean, at its core, the argument that you should be allowed to not refuse service for that is the same as the argument of, hey, if you have red hair, I want to refuse you service. If you have blue eyes, I don't like people with blue eyes, I want to refuse you service. If you're under 5'6", I want to refuse you service. These are all things, I mean, we're talking about things those are things people can't help. And you're saying, because of the way you are naturally, I'm going to refuse service to you. Well, that's a problem, because you're discriminating for arbitrary reasons. Nobody's saying if somebody comes in your store and they start knocking over shelves and shit and they're screaming curse words that you can't kick them out. Of course you could kick them out. Again, the standard is you can't discriminate for arbitrary reasons. So yet again, all this nuance, all this complexity, this entire conversation is lost on Pat Robertson because all he wants to do is Bible thump, even though he doesn't know what the fuck is in the Bible, and he wants to compare gay marriage to dog sex and dog marriage.